Welcome back. I'm Tyler, you're watching Scarfing Scarves, and welcome to the 22nd installment of Last Week Lolita News. At the top of the segment, this looks like Taobao Afterbirth. I have no idea what AP was thinking, and this reporter would like to formally request the next person who takes off with someone's tablecloth to make a dress to be photographed like it committed a federal crime be drug out into the square, restrained, and then offered several services to counteract what I can only assume is a latent urge to undo all that is good in this world. Granted, this blouse has committed more crimes against the human race than the JSK could ever dream of, except not, because I just noticed that the waist on this stock image somehow continues all the way past your tits. Look at this nonsense. Waist as it should be? Utter frackery. Bare minimum expected for dropping $250 on a dress? What the fuck happened here, AP? Are you drunk? The brand is yet to respond as to whether or not this picture was taken under the supervision of a legally blind naked mole rat with access to whiskey and a burning urge to punish those with functioning corneas, and sources say the previous statement holds no factual basis because you can't blame mole rats for the sins of man. Fun fact, naked mole rats are not actually blind. They have some limited vision, can live up to 32 years, are seriously resistant to cancer, and now you know way more than you ever wanted to about what is essentially an angry pink potato. It is also possible that this is a Photoshop attempt gone terribly awry, in which case the angry blind rodent comment still stands, and this reporter would recommend hiring a creature that can tell fuck all from finish next time you want someone to hand over their rent money on pain of 2 busted kneecaps and a stern talking to from a squat-looking man named Vinny. Speaking of things that should get you a pair of cement tea parties and sent straight to the bottom of the ocean, Angelic Pretty continues to channel its inner Chinese clusterfuck with the unveiling of pieces that, if released by any other brand, would be the Lunesta equivalent of a dress. That said, the other pictures do show some hope for the piece, and while runway photos are notoriously unreliable as to the actual final product, there is a chance that AP won't cut the waistline up to your neck, dip it in Dayglow green, and beat whatever comes out with the business end of a lead-lined parasol. Other fashions would just use the ugly stick, but Lolita has some dignity. Other upcoming releases apparently include a rogue nightgown, a carousel print, and another series that could be Jesus Christ god-awful or semi-decent depending on whether or not AP wants to see the world burn. The fact that it has a cat on it is all I need to lose any sense of discernment. Please don't wreck this for me, or I swear to Zool I'm going to buy BTSSB. Turning towards news unrelated with this reporter's potential affair with a brand known for pumping out possessed cross-species rabbit bears that strike terror into the farthest reaches of your soul. As that about wraps up the week, we turn towards part 2 of Last Week Lolita News' newest special segment, in which I try to convince you that you haven't made a grave mistake, you eye the little red button in the corner, and we all leave here no better off for the irreplaceable minutes spent watching some over-caffeinated prat prattle on about the political disenfranchisement of an entire subset of the American population. A quick recap from the last episode. Last we left off, the wearing of Lolita fashion at the time of its origin in 1990s Japan was a definite feminist statement due to the gendered cultural dictums heaped on the Japanese women in that time period. Expectations that they find a husband, have children, and settle down as a housewife as soon as possible were paramount, and the wearing of a fashion that went entirely against those pressures whilst also making the wearer stand out like a frilly beacon flew directly in the face of every standard of what a proper woman was supposed to be. All this taken into account, the rebellious creation of a space between being father-dependent young girls and husband-reliant young women was an act of obvious feminist consequence that gave these young women a place to pursue something they loved as individuals, outside of and in opposition to the cultural imperatives expected of them. Which is essentially to say, it's damn hard to be pressured into getting a husband when you look like the Annabelle doll. Everyone knows porcelain dolls are the devil, and no one in their right ever-loving mind is going to mess with someone who looks like that creature their great aunt got them when they were 5. Who on earth thinks these things are a good idea? Why would anyone want this thing to stare at them while they sleep? Mine ended up locked in a closet, and Lolita's Japanese origins aside, is Lolita Feminist specifically in an American context? To which the answer is, you thought I was going to give it away, but now you're going to have to sit through further backstory because life is never black and white except for on issues of race, which is where this is going. Don't you wish you were watching anything else? Your regret with your life choices aside, to comprehend whether or not Lolita is feminist in this sector of the West, we first have to address the fact that America, unlike Japan, is not a homogeneous society. As of July 2015, the US has a population estimate of roughly 321 million people. 13.3% of that number identifies as Black or African American alone, 61.6% identifies as white alone of neither Hispanic nor Latino origin, and Hispanic, Asian, and mixed races fall in at 17.6%, 5.6%, and 2.6% respectively. It's also worth noting that American Indian and Alaskan natives come in at 1.2% and Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders at 0.2%. These lenses of race have a large impact on American womanhood, and each one has a unique effect on the gendered experience of its members. That said, in beginning to explore a potential relationship with Lolita and feminism, the primary focus of this data will be the 13.3% of Black or African Americans. This choice is in large part to the historied and continued tumultuous relationship between this country and a community that has always been front and center in American race relations. If by relations you mean importing a bunch of people into forced servitude, destroying their social fabric, and mandating their unequal position in society through laws, cultural norms, and virulent unfettered violence that continues to this day, I bet you're regretting clicking this video now. Jesus Christ, it doesn't end there. Because we start with our focus on the Black community specifically for a good reason. It starts with slavery. Jesus Christ, look at the puppy. Assuming a lot of you haven't jumped ship already, unlike their white counterparts, the Black community in the US has always been placed in a starkly different relationship with respect to gender. In the time that free women were corralled within the domestic sphere, enslaved Black women were forced to work just as much as the men. And while I promised I'll take you out of this chilling reminder of large-scale human immorality in a second, it is important to note that just as Black men and women were pushed into hard labor regardless of sex, so too was the early notion of the nuclear family, a fantasy only available to people who seem to think you could collect humans like farm equipment and somehow go to church on Sunday because Jesus is totally down with that, I guess. The fuck is wrong with these people? Cognitive dissonance in mass aside, what does this depressingly realistic tale have to do with the modern day, and why the frack is this related to whether or not Lolita is feminist in America? I'm getting to that. You see, the enslavement of an entire subset of the human race based on skin color alone doesn't exactly go away overnight. The effects on the Black community did not fade into the fabric of time on the day of emancipation, and even as their rights excelled, their hard-fought, constantly embattled position in this country against income inequality, political disenfranchisement, pointed imprisonment, police violence, and cultural dictums against their very physical forms and communities as a whole continues to this very day. The overrepresentation of Black men in prison has had a chillingly similar effect on the Black family, not unlike the days that husbands and fathers could be sold at will, and the resulting family dynamic has left a very different version of womanhood for Black women to fill. In short, the white, male superior nuclear household of a stay-at-home subservient wife and all the associated Caucasian stratification of domestic power was never the primary Black American gender experience. Their economic and social caste made the luxury of a financial invalid as a life partner next to impossible, and the resulting expectation for both parties to contribute to the household finances is an enduring standard to this day. That is, if the man in your house isn't in prison because he was wearing a hoodie, when are they going to start putting warning labels on those things? Do not wear unless your heritage looks like Bill O'Reilly's ass and the latest edition of Justin Bieber's ballad to fuck society in general. Whatever the case, unlike their singularly domestic roles of their well-to-do white counterparts, Black women have always worked outside the home. And quite frankly, that has been used against them. The modern stigma of unfemininity, aggression, and an unwomanly carriage is in direct line with their experience of institutionalized racism and ensuing economic disenfranchisement. I.e., they had to work when women were supposed to stay home, they had to fight when women were supposed to be weak, and they had to carry themselves in the way you do when the majority of society believes you to be somehow lesser in every single way, both as a woman and as a human being. Here, have a puppy and try not to weep for the human race. Add the mythic figure of the strong Black woman to the mix, and you have a woman who must fight through a fog of racial stereotypes on one side and catch heat from her own community if she can't quite hack it on the other. Because a Black woman must be strong, she cannot be delicate. Or at least so the facade goes. And that finally brings us back to the relationship between feminism and Lolita fashion in the States. Because Black women navigate gender differently through a lens of race, their mere participation in this fashion has far-flung social effects regardless of whether she is marching down Pennsylvania Avenue or just listening to music in a quiet cafe. The condemnation for never having been white, fragile, private household helpmates made of pressed cotton dresses and shiny cleaning machines shadows their every move, and the stereotypes of unfemininity combined with the virulent racism from the days that people of their skin color were bought and sold stocks them with the same accusations that you'll hear in the undertones of respectability politics today. Unrefinement, aggression, on the one hand far too rough to be feminine, and on the other so hypersexualized their physical form is made a moral failing just by nature of being. Now take all of that and return to the black Lolita sitting in the cafe. It should be obvious, her very wearing of this fashion constitutes an act of rebellion. Whether she participates in politics or not, whether she raises her voice or not, the social impact of her mode of dress is inherently political by virtue of existing in public space as it flies directly in the face of the stereotypes aimed against her. This fashion is femininity on steroids. This fashion says fuck you to anyone who dares think they have you pigeonholed into some kind of social mold. And this fashion's overt, unapologetic, and ironclad presentation of oneself in all its delicate construction and lace is something that cannot be interpreted as anything other than absolute self-possession. In short, there is strength in wearing something so delicate. This is especially so for a black woman. And finally, it is, at its core, an expression of intersectional feminism. Also, colorism is a thing, but we're not going into that. There's already a video on it, and I'm pretty sure I lost half of you at the mention of the antebellum South. Whatever the case, now that you've ridden through the hellhole of human immorality on a scale that can only be cured by several days of ice cream binging and enough retail therapy to owe your kidneys to a Russian billionaire, what does this mean for Lolita fashion in general in relations to feminism? To which the answer is, it's complicated. Complicated enough to merit another video, and you'll have to wait until next week because that's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you for watching Last Week Lolita News, and be sure to tune in next week for yet another time that this general nonsense will actually be relevant, when we cover the tough topics like, why did I just force several decades of African American gender studies into your skull? What the fuck does this have to do with feminism in general? And how the hell can you possibly still be making words? Next time on Last Week Lolita News. This has been Tyler. You've been watching Scarfing Scarves, and I'll catch you next time. Hey there, thanks for enduring part 2 of the latest rendition of LWLN's fun time ride through the hellish minutia of the human experience. I'd like to send a special thank you to my patrons who put up with far more image macros than necessary, and should you have some interest in seeing the pre-coffee induced cardiac arrest product of a woman who's analyzing Lolita fashion one overly long video at a time, have a general interest in seeing what happens to a human being deprived of sleep and fueled by espresso, or think you want to push LWN out of the weeds and into places yet unknown to the sane and well-adjusted, you can head over to patreon.com/lastweeklolitanews to throw your weight behind this crazy experiment I'm currently calling a YouTube show. Who knows where this is going? I'm aiming for heavily medicated and with a side of buyer's remorse. Thanks again, guys, and I'll catch you next time on Last Week Lolita News.